Em veus?
¿Me ves?
No em veus.
No me ves.
تراني لا تراني.
Em veus? No em
¿Me
veus.
ves? No me ves.
Em veus?
¿Me
No em
ves?
veus.
No me ves.
Me ves? No me ves.
Em veus? No em veus.
¿Me ves? No me ves.
¿Me ves? No me ves.
Em veus?
¿Me
No em
ves?
veus.
No me ves.
Em veus?
¿Me ves?
Welcome to the
Bienvenidos al
16th Forum.
Forum
I can see you, but I
16.
can feel you.
No os
You're
veo, pero
warm,
os
it is light,
escucho.
a fight
La
and battle. This
16ª
16th
edición
edition
está
is under this
marcada por la
pandemic,
pandemia. En el
COVID-19.
Forum
We are
pondremos
going
en
to
evidencia la
highlight the
crisis
crisis of life
de
and
la
the
vida y
cures.
los
For
cuidados.
many
Hace años
years,
que lo
we are denouncing many years
denunciamos y
ago.
ahora
I believe that the
al
earth, the
nuevo tiempo
planet, all the
de la
creatures
mitad de la
have
humanidad,
felt the
la sumisión de las
pain
mujeres a
in
los
this
hombres por el
situation. The
patriarcado y la violencia machista no
situation
tienen
against
razón de subsistir, ni material,
gender
ni moral,
violence
ni
has no
espiritual.
reason to be alive.
Vivimos un
We are
estallido mundial
experiencing
del ya
a
basta,
situation where
ya
that's
basta
enough.
con
Several
la
million
huelga
of
feminista,
women
con
in
los
different women's
movimientos
strikes
como
like Me Too
Me
or
Too
Maria Verde
o,
movement and
por
different
ejemplo,
women in
también
Poland
lo que ha habido en
against
Polonia por
the
el
situation of the
aborto
abortion in
libre.
that
En
country.
el
In the
siglo
middle of the
XXI todavía no
21st
hemos
century, we
abolido
were not able to get
el
rid of
patriarcado, pero lo
patriarchy, but we'll
conseguiremos.
do it. I'm totally
Confío
truthful.
en
I do
nuestras
believe
hijas y
in our
nietas.
daughters
El
and
mundo,
granddaughters.
la
Our world,
vida,
our
se convertirá
society
en un
will
tiempo de
fight for
amor y de
that and will
libertad.
achieve a
Ahora
world of
mismo
freedom and love.
estamos
We
lejos
are far
físicamente,
away.
no
We
nos
are not
podemos
physically
consolar,
close. We
abrazar,
cannot hug each other
expresar
and to
nuestros
express our feelings with the body
sentimientos y el
and with
calor
the
de nuestra
warmth that our
proximidad,
bodies have.
pero
But
nos
we are
dejamos
fighting for that. We want to be
en el
together. We
objetivo de
want to
crear
create
alianzas para
different
prevenir,
alliances at all
denunciar,
social levels. We
hacer
want to offer
propuestas
very
constructivas para
constructive
erradicar la
proposals to
violencia
get rid
machista de
of
nuestras
the
vidas.
male
En estos
violence.
6
These
días
days we are going to
reflexionaremos
think about it.
y
We are going to
extraeremos
reflect on the
conclusiones para ver
different
cómo
conclusions that
continuamos
will offer a
de las
solution. What
propuestas
are the different
elaboradas entre
proposals that
todas
we
para
created all
cambiar
together
las
to change the
relaciones de dominio
domination
que
situations that
existe
we
en esta
suffer in
sociedad
our
patriarcal,
society? I believe
relaciones
that
que
the
la pandemia ha
has
agravado.
strengthened this problem.
Se
The
resalta
pandemic
la
offered
necesidad de los
us the
cuidados,
need
los
to have a
recursos
cure, to
esenciales
know
para la
what are the
vida,
main
las
essential resources
políticas,
for
los bienes
life, the
comunales y los
the
derechos
common good, the
universales.
universal rights and freedoms.
Necesitamos
We must
construir la
build a greater
estructura
structure that will
que
be able to
responda a esta
offer an answer to
emergencia
this
a largo
emergency
plazo, mirando
on a
al
long-term
futuro.
basis, always looking
Ya
towards
lo
the future.
hacemos con el
We also need
soporte
the mutual
mutuo.
support, all the
Las
community
redes de
support
apoyo
networks.
comunitario es mucho
However, I
más
do believe that we
importante
must work for
trabajar
a social
para
change
un
that
cambio
will
social
put
que
the
ponga
life of
en
the
el
individuals
centro
in the
la vida.
center of the
Así lo
matter.
explicaba
As Silvia
Silvia
Federici
Federici
told us in
en
the
el
second
segundo
International
Congreso
Congress
Internacional
Against
contra las
Gender
Violencias
Violence. The
Machistas, lo
tiny
que
things of
cada
our
una
daily work,
hace
everything
para
what we do
mejorar
in order to
su
improve
vida
our lives
de
and
las
those that
personas
we
que
love
quiere o con los que
with those
convive y
that we
trabaja
coexist and
para
work in
conseguir
order to
ser
be much more
efectivas
efficient. We
necesitan
need
la
sympathy, we
empatía
need a
y
better
la transformación
transformation
de
of
este
this
sistema
value
de valores
system
y
and general
poderes.
power. The
El
feminist
sentido
feeling of
del
the political
principio feminista
situations, they are something that we
quiere
really
decir
need.
que se
They are get
determinan, se
matched
influyen
and they will
entre
set
sí
the path for
y
life in the nature
tenemos que
life, the human
sustituir la
life. We must
violencia y el
replace
dominio
domination and
inherente
violence
al
that belongs to
patriarcado,
patriarchy,
su
the
base
social
social y económica, para
pillars of
situar
the
el
economy
gozo,
to
la
be able
creatividad de la
to
vida como
get
eje
a
del
much more
sistema
enjoyable
social
life
libre
in a
y
common
comunitario.
society.
La
The pandemics,
pandemia
it
es
is
un choque que
a very
hace
troublesome situation
tambalearse
that
toda
puts at risk
la
the
trama
economic and social systems.
social
The patriarchy system
y
is not bearable anymore
las
for
consecuencias de
people.
la
COVID-19
COVID-19
consequences worsen
empeoran la
inequalities,
violencia contra
discrimination,
las
and
mujeres,
violence
las
against women.
desigualdades.
We are
Estamos viendo
witnessing
que
that
este
this
modelo
model that is
que
closing
encierra a
all
las
the women
mujeres
at
en el hogar
home uh, doesn't offer the value
dobla
of women
las
work. I believe that the
tareas de la mujer.
society, the reproduction system, as well as
Es
the
también
daily cures,
altamente
they are
perjudicial para la
against
vida.
the life of women.
Según la
After
macroencuesta
a
de
macro survey of
2019,
2019,
57%
57.3%
de
of
las
women in the
mujeres
Spanish
han
states suffered
sufrido
violence
violencia por
just
el hecho de
for
ser
the mere
mujeres.
fact of being
Y
women.
según
And the
la encuesta
2016
en
survey in Catalonia,
Cataluña,
64.4% suffer violence
luego
due to
también
the fact that
un
we are women.
40%
Despite the different
lo
legislation
han
and
sufrido.
measures in
Podemos
the last
constatar, a
years,
pesar de
we
las
can
leyes, que la
witness that
violencia
gender
machista
violence is
está
still
bien
instilled
instalada
in
en
our
esta sociedad.
society. The
La
pandemic
pandemia ha
has raised
estallado en un
in a
sistema,
health
en un
system that is going
retroceso,
backwards.
un sistema
The
sanitario.
globalization governments are
Llevamos
privatizing for
4
more than 40
décadas
years
de
the
privatizaciones
public health system
con
in
las
order to
crisis
have much more
financieras o de
profits
producción de este
for the
sistema.
financial benefit
Cuando
of
el
all it all.
confinamiento ha detenido
We
el
are
mujer,
women, we are
el
at
hombre,
the front
el
line. We
mundo, las
must
mujeres
take
estamos en
urgent
primera
measures, taking into
línea.
account
Hay un
once
impacto
again
de
we can
género en
witness the
esta
gender impact.
pandemia. Se ha
There
instalado
is
la
much more
precariedad en
precarity
las
in labor
condiciones laborales,
conditions,
sobre
mainly
todo
in all
en los
these
sectores de
sectors
los
devoted
cuidados de
to
las personas. El
care of the
aumento
people.
de
The rising level
la
of
pobreza, el
poverty,
aumento
the
de la
precarious
precariedad
jobs, and the
está
survival
fuera de
economy
todas las
is
coberturas
not including social
y por lo tanto
systems. We
hay
need to
que
think about a
tener, o
common
sea, una renta
system to
mínima
improve
universal
this
para
precariat,
los
the
jóvenes, las
poverty.
mujeres
Young
y
and
la gente
women are
vulnerable.
suffering the
Las mujeres
poverty.
invisibles
At the World
demasiado
of
tiempo
Forum,
y
the invisible women are
vemos, o sea, cómo
more
se
visible right
normaliza
now, as we can see
la
that the
violencia hacia
violence
las
against
mujeres.
women are much more
Avanzamos,
standardized. We are progressing. We suffer
ganamos
a lot of pressure, of course, but
influencia
we are
en la
also
mesa
putting
inaugural
more pressure thanks to
de
our
este
movement.
foro.
In our
Queremos avanzar
roundtable,
en
we
las
will work
estrategias y
towards
cómo
tomorrow morning
continuamos para
to have to
seguir
define better strategies to hide
aboliendo
this hidden violence. We must think
la
elderly
violencia,
women, women without a home, the different diversity, women,
violencias
the digital
digitales,
violence that we
las
cannot
mujeres en situación
detect,
de
the
violencia
uh,
machista
misogynic
en
violence,
toda su diversidad
and we all
necesitan
need a
la
holistic
integración,
action
la
in order
atención
to offer
jurídica,
an answer from
emocional,
a legal
la reparación
perspective.
a
We
todos
need
los
to
niveles
repair
para
at all
poder asumir
levels to
en
be able
libertad
to reach a
una
higher
nueva
level
vida
of
sin
freedom
violencia ni
without
para ellas ni
violence,
para sus hijos.
neither for the women,
A
for
pesar
their
de la
kids.
buena voluntad de
Despite the
algunos sectores
goodwill
de
that
los
we can see in
gobiernos
different governments
autonómicos
here
y
in
estatal,
Spain, the
las
political
medidas
measures are
políticas
not
no
at the
están a la
expectation
altura de la
of the results
magnitud
that we
de
want to achieve
los
in this
problemas.
pandemic.
Son
They are not
insuficientes.
enough. There
Las
is a lack of
carencias
services in public
recaen en
companies. This is
perjuicio
going
sobre las
against the
mujeres.
women's situation. The
Vienen,
cures
o
that come
sea,
from European
cestas de
funds,
euros,
they are
pero
not
no
giving
parecen
priority to the vital professions and the vital
privilegiar
services.
los sectores
The health
limitados.
deficit that we
Los
are
déficits
suffering till
sanitarios
2008 have been
se han
mortal.
notado
It's due to the
en los 8
virus for
meses que
more than 8
llevamos
months.
de
The different batches that
pandemia
have been approved for primary care
y
are at a
las
half of the
previsiones se quedan en la mitad
WHO
de lo que
recommendations.
preconiza
All
la
the
OMS.
doctors and the health
Sentimiento
staff have been applauded
muy
from our
loable, pero que no ha
balconies,
sido
but we
correspondido
didn't
por un
see an answer
presupuesto
from a budget
ni estatal
perspective.
ni au-
The greed
autonómico.
of the capital is not
Todo ello
acceptable anymore. What all these sectors are asking for, they want to have the great work conditions, the different protests that we can see in front of hospitals, the different strikes of doctors, students, girls, they are all over the place with different banners and protesting. They tell us education is not enough. We need much more training for the future. We want better hospitals. We must be aware. We must listen each other. The pandemic management, it is set to foster the private capital in the businesses against the citizens. This is going to be a threat against population, nature, and the economy in itself. If we are able to find a solution in a future horizon, we'll be able to do it. So therefore, we must be rooted in our territory. This world is completely vertical. It is very difficult to change the pattern. We can feel that there is an exploitation and exclusion of many coming from the top. And we are suffering this contemporary situation. Women dominated by men. Everything has a price. The myth of money is always present in our lives, but the valuable things are less valued. As Mr. Frederici said, the weapon manufacturing is increasing. However, cures and reproduction systems are not being included in the system. This is a dangerous situation. This is a situation that it goes against the job creation, the feminist economy, and this is something that we'll talk about it tomorrow afternoon. Feminist economy is offering a disruptive model to change the reality and to place in the center cure and life. World data, as it happens in our country, are overwhelming. We must know how this economy impacts on women, how we can see an increasing level of gender violence all over the place. Women cannot choose who they want to share their lives. Work and jobs is under a dependency chain that doesn't offer the freedom for the different consent of women amongst the women and the men. We are living in a fiction of this compulsory system. However, we'll share the different strategies. We'll see what's the work made by the different entities and organizations of feminists in the world. We want to open different university. We want to create different feminist parties. The most successful fights in the last years have been those that allow us to be together. Together we are stronger. We must fight for it. Of course, we must work for procreation, for cures at home. Patriarchy, it is controlling all over the countries in the world for many years. In order to face it and to get rid of it, the women movement has been spread all over the place. All the corners of the planet are aware of this fight. Despite the different freedom restrictions that we are suffering, in order to respect the health measures, we'll be out in the street, we'll protest, we'll communicate in the media, we'll be able to communicate one each other. We want to be free, we want to be fruitful, we want to be natural, we want to be authentic. We are very diverse. We come from different social structures. We have also different biologies. We have loads of strategies to read our common goal, women's rights to get rid of gender violence. The majority of topics we are having a common strategy. There are issues that are quite Islamic. When we talk about prostitution and the market of sex, sexual workers, and the different abolitionisms, prohibitionism, and many others. We cannot do it divided. We must fight all together. We must be gathered, always trying to respect the women's rights. We need a consensus. We don't want to have obstacles. We must be together to show our strength. We are all united in a massive manner. We must get together to find a common goals from respect and from freedom. We have a conceptual framework that will place the life at the center of everything. The cures, the freedom of speech, respect. We want to strengthen the feminist movement and all the mobilizations that are needed. This is my message. The pandemic emergency is like a tectonic plate that is changing the real situation for the best and for the worst. We can have a common approach. We can be quite destructive, like a cataclysm, but we can have a better optics. The social recovery, the economic recovery will be an opportunity for the feminist movement altogether with the social movements fighting for social justice. Facing this dramatic situation of murderers, all the gender male examples, sexual aggression and rapes, the minor abuses, and maybe pandemics, we'll see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? Let's get stronger than ever. Let's change the model. Let's get rid of myths, taboos, and dogmas. We can see that there is a solution for the essential services, everything that has to do with your health and education have been to be developed by public agencies, right? So this is what we really want. The community has to held the reins, not the pharma companies, the hospitals, the public systems with the great salaries adapted to the reality of the situation, as well as social services. The right for a home. We want a reality that will make us much stronger. We want to place the people's needs on top of the individual profits. We'll fit this rebellion, a healthy rebellion, thanks to the conclusions of the forum. There is a lot of gender violence that starts since the birth of a woman. There is a lot of differences between sexual differences and genders. We are suffering a very deep and rooted violence developed by the state. Misogyny has been always like this, right? So we are in front of a dictatorship. We are inside at the courts, and the people are not aware of the suffering of a woman. We have a lot of laws and acts against the women that doesn't protect the victims. It is very difficult to find a great legislation for women protection. It is hard, right? Let me just conclude sharing with you with an optimistic note. We have a bright future. The Cinderellas and all the princesses that have been abandoned will give birth to the scientist women, the craft women, the fighters all together, fighting for small and big causes at home or outside home. Rosalia de Mamangwal, all of them, they are great references for the new girl generations of different generations all together. Boys and girls will fight for that. We'll overcome the different divisions and breaches and gaps that we can see. Women, young women, they are scared. They make things possible. They tell us that they have inside themselves a feeling of a new world that will be much better for men and women, women and men. A world that they will love with the animals, the plants that will include the cures and will always love girls. We are essential. We are vital. Inside this obscure moment, we'll find in darkness and structural change. Stop the violence against women. Well, good morning. Let's resume with this 16th forum with a motto that I created for this pandemic situation. Invisible for many time, essential for many years. Thank you very much for being amongst us for more than 16 years. I feel deeply thankful. Thank you very much to all the individuals representing the different institutions that made possible to organize this forum, the Potencial Barcelona that offer all the means. Well, it was not possible to be at Francesca Bonmaison Civic Center. We'd like to thank all the uh, departments of the Catalan government, of Barcelona City Council, all the agencies that are together with us in order to fight against gender violence. We are able to create a new strategy and we'll offer the floor to the participants once the presentations will finish. All the participants will have the chat box to ask questions to the speakers. You have at the right side the screen if you want to ask something, right? The chat box at the right side of your screen, and we'll try to gather all the questions for the speakers. We are going to share how it is possible that despite all the efforts that have been made previously, thanks to the public strategies, so we hope that will last for good, naturalization and impunity against gender violence. That's why we would like to get focused on different speakers. We have amongst us today Alba Alfageme. She's a psychologist specialized in a gender violence approach, and then she's going to share a new perspective on this reality. We have Carme, president of the Non-Standard Women Association. She's going to talk about how, from normalization, we are dealing with a society and how we treat different women, as well as Teresa Saez from Lunes Lilas from Navarra. She's going to talk about how to stop gender violence. She says sexual violence has been always in the closet for many years. We were ashamed for many years as women. The moment has arrived. We have to change it for good. We want to have a better justice. We and Merlys Mosquera, PhD student sociologist at the Autonomous University of Barcelona, and she's going to talk about the relationship of migration and gender. What are the causes of women migration? What are the challenges that they suffer today? Women. Without further, would like to give the floor to my dear colleague Alba Alfageme. Alba Alfageme, she's a psychologist specialized in male violence approach and psychological intervention in a crisis situation. She's a partner teacher at the University of Barcelona, the Girona University, in many master's and postgraduate studies for more than 15 years. She has been working at Home Affairs Catalan Department developing security policies from a gender perspective as well as different policies against gender violence. She's been involved in different European projects as an expert, and she's developing the first European project against social impact when we have been suffering human trafficking. She works as a forensic doctor of sexual issues. She's also a counselor at the government related with gender violence as well as incorporation of a gender perspective in different research spaces and policies to have different approach when dealing with the gender violence. She's been working in different international projects such as in India, Cambodia, El Salvador, and Brazil. She also developed several projects against sexual violence. Here she is. I'd like to give her the floor. Alba, go ahead. I'm sorry, live issues. Anyway, Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the members of the platform. Thanks for organizing. You've been very careful when preparing this amazing platform, and I'd like to greet all the people that are connected with us. And as Monse mentioned, this is quite a weird situation, but we must be able and resilient. We must get adapted to this reality in the such called life that we'll have. So I do agree with all the words of Monse, the words of Monse that said that we are feeling this warmth. Once I was called, they asked me if I was capable to set a relationship between the visibilization of women history in all the male violence against women, an item that I worked for many years. And as Monson mentioned, we can see that we are in a turning point. It is important to write on a paper and to tell the people what are the reasons that made invisible the women issues, that they are still invisible, because I believe that this lack of vision that we women suffered for many years in history, it is the idea of non-existing, not letting us to exist, not letting us to be a human being. This is something related with different cultural perspectives. Therefore, the power management always in the hands of a man has been always pursuing and chasing this idea of not letting us to be with capital letters, always controlling our lives. This lack of visibility made us impossible to be in different arenas. And since we are girls, they tell us that we are not able to do many things. They always are telling us in an indirect or direct manner that we are not capable of doing things and making things possible. This the world is very hostile. Therefore, we are smaller than men. We are always trying from. To me, it's key because we must learn to say no to all the privileges that we are able to have. We need to stop this accepting the limitations of patriarchy for not letting us to be the way we'd like to be. And also, we must be able to create our own lives. To me, a very important factor has played a very important role. It is education in fear. To fear, I was able to share different roundtables with Teresa and with other panelists that work with sexual violence. They instill in ourselves the idea that we are small, and many feminist authors they put on the table this idea. It is vital axis in our own development. This has as a main goal to stop us, to make us invisible, to control us. Therefore, this functional fear aiming at controlling us, it is not something that happened by chance. All the women we are working with, we know that we are increasing the level of fear of women. We are educated in fear. Therefore, this fear has a lot to do with this idea that we were not able to tell the people what have been our experiences in relationship with male violence. They didn't allow us to to tell the people what happened to us. It is vital to focus on this idea, and I believe that this forum is insisting in this idea, an idea that is key. How to stop with being invisible. This is what we said. Violence are increasing. Silence reinforces, offers impunity to the aggressors, not only the aggressors, but also impunity to this patriarchy system that has darkened. Uh, we have this patriarchy that is instilled, that belongs to us, and in many, many occasions, it standardized and normalized our vision when we have this bias, which is always very difficult to detect. So we've been able to create this patriarchy bias. I'm not going to repeat all the data because Monty already mentioned it. We must bear in mind all the data, how women suffered this kind of male violence, but on the other side, we know that the big figures of violence, we know that the levels to complain about it in official institution are very low. The amount of complaints are around 20-30%, therefore 70-80% are not reported in an environment that we developed, and historically we already made quite a big job. And for sexual violence, we know that the reporting cases doesn't reach 10%, they're around 8%. Therefore we have a lack of visibility around 92% of the sexual violence. We'll talk about the reasons, and I'm sure that Teresa will talk about it later. Why this silence? Why this silence is going against us? I always say that this silence, it is not by chance. It is the cause. It is the result of an oppressor system that make us invisible. And what are the mechanics of this the system that make us invisible? When they invite me to this panel, suddenly I try to create a puzzle, and in order to better understand this lack of visibility, there are several tips of the iceberg that are very important to take into account. Many of these issues have been worked for many years and developed, but we can see that they are repeatedly appearing in our uh, unconscious mind of our collectivities. To me, uh, this has to do with the alterity concept of Simone de Beauvoir. Man has been always the absolute subject, and women is the other subject, the unknown subject. They didn't allow us to tell us who we are. This created invisibility on a purpose. And as once mentioned, and all the colleagues of the panel will talk about it, right? The most axis of oppression we will have in our life, we will be much more invisible. Less room you will have to share your issues. You will have a lower echo of your needs, and you won't be listened. To me, the concept of authority has been developed for many years, but this idea has to be kept. It is the essence of what is patriarchy. On the other hand, I believe that there is a very important issue. How male violence suddenly they became like a social threat. So they we accepted historically male violence. The patriarchy has a great ability to get adapted, to mutate. And what can we do? It is like a chameleon. So we have less visibility. We Because the patriarchy is like a chameleon. How violence is hidden in the digital sphere. This patriarchy, right, with the acceptance of a violence, is able to reduce the importance of the violence and tries to hidden the violence. They try to make violence much more sophisticated, less evident. The shapes of today's male violence are much more perverted, and it's very difficult to identify them. We made a great work with the physical violence and sexual violence. When we have a big level of oral violence and physical violence, everything is regulated for these social justice systems. The patriarchy created these justice and legal systems, and at the end, it's like a machine that because at its birth we have this patriarchy vision from the legal system. I believe that it is very important to know when we have such hard questions, and let me uh, use this adjective, so brutal data, right? How many women died and passed away this year? It is normal for some women to have this kind of assassinations and murders, and this is quite worrisome. It's very worrisome because the goal is not only to get rid of these murders, but suddenly we witness that there are several levels that allow us to have this historical acceptance that made us to hold the burden of these violent systems, and how we accepted and normalized the pain of women in our Christian and Judaic system. The martyr women that accept everything, they will be great women if they keep silent. To me, these women that beyond that are related with the idea of sacrifice, not telling the truth, related with quite a very complex concept that has to do with honor, the honor of women. What is the public image that society has in relationship with the women? The honor women, the ones that are able to keep silent. They are a normal. Therefore, we can see that the experience of pain, the experience of inequality is something normal because you, as women, will always have to face this reality. This is quite important, as Mons mentioned before. Our grandmothers, they suffered these experiences, and it is vital to get rid of it for our daughters, for the good of our granddaughters too. There is a key question when we want to understand male violence and the different evolution. What has been the comfort in society of women as victims? If we put together the alterity themes, the honor of the women, and we can understand this history mutation in underworld of a patriarchy that acts like a chameleon, we reach a moment in which we all accept that we have this history, social community where women are victims. Otherwise, we'll have to think about a different violent structural forms holding in this collective social perspective. Is there any other violence, murdering, harassing, raping the women life as much as patriarchy? We, as a feminist, we are fighting to stop that. It has been a comfort in history. Everything that happened to the other women, as we are not impacting on the other power structures, we are not suffering at all, right? It is important to know to create this metaphor and to be able to detect other violent forms that are not accepted anymore. And we always witness this comfort in society that hold this violence alive. Another element that to me is very important, and it's good to talk about it, has been the social history separation amongst the private and public spheres, the movement of Me Too, Time's Up, and Mental movement, and many others, as once mentioned before. These movements offer a new room for women to publicly speak out what happens in private arena, to make personal policies. What is private is not the politics, right? But we can see the second wave of feminism in the 1970s. Suddenly, the private world appears into politics, right? It is important to know that this is playing a very important role against sexual violence at home, at the private arena. How this sexual violence is once again in the private field. We must make it visible in the public field, and the harassment of women in jobs at work, what they suffer, this is an structural problem. The visibilization of violence and to let people know the level of violence. Each of every two women will suffer this male violence, as we can see in the European survey. Each of every two women suffer sexual harassment in their workplace. It is share the private issues in the public arena for society to know what we suffer as women for the mere fact of being women. Another important and key aspect has been already highlighted by guilty, feeling guilty, and guilt has been the cornerstone. And when you work as a psychologist, you feel that guilt has been the logic that nurtured this silent. What did you do? What you didn't do? Did you complain? Did you report it about it? Did you shout it out? How did you support it for many years? This, how were you able to bear it in your body, right? It is very important to try to focus on this issue. Guilt has been a turning point in order to recovery women dignity and social dignity. The idea behind the Court's, the theory of a fair world is applied against male violence. We think that the world is fair, but if you suffer something wrong, this is due to you because you did something. As we are trained and educated on from this perspective, not to get out alone in the street, not to be agreeable, not to accept some actions from the others if you don't want to have a relation. They are putting us some rules. If they are offering us these rules, and suddenly if you decide to act on that without these constant pressures, this will go against you. Despite you respect the patriarchy systems, that will be always an excuse for you to be guilty, for you to be the responsible of everything that happened, of your actions, or your behavior system. I do believe that this is quite capital to understand. I come from the psychology field and I work with many traumas. More than 80% of situations that experience sexual violence, women they get blocked, and this blockage is an instant answer. We historically know that in the legal procedures has been used against women in order to make them to be less credible because this blockage has an implication on the discourse. We have the trauma memory, then we have an spontaneous agreement. Maybe in your first declaration you didn't remember the what happened, and in the recovery work, right? These memories appear. Maybe you have a color distortion that you cannot remember how long took from the aggression moment and since you declared, and you will say you were there for a while and it only happened 5 minutes. So the idea of not understanding women, how violence impact on us, because we always focus on the violence in the public sphere that impacted men, but we must bear in mind that the victimization in the public arena are always suffered by men, but we've been always told as women that let's be careful when we are out in the street, and this is a biased perspective. We get confused. More than 80% of male violence appear in our public and private spheres and in the areas that we can feel safe enough. Therefore, it is very important to understand that we need a narrative. We need to give much more visibility about what we suffer. If we get blocked, right, they cannot ask if we make some resistance because feeling guilty and guilt it is an element that retain women in this silence and in invisibility. This element that triggers because we are all kids of this patriarchy system, we have to deconstruct it because the guilt it is the last step when you accompany in a psychology process. It is the last step to incorporate everything that they suffered. And many women they tell you it is not only the impression, there is like a second trauma impact and how the environment suddenly interpreted what happened and how the environment judged you and how you have to hold not only the trauma, but also how the environment is reading the reality. In this common patriarchy structure is triggered in women in a society. We have this narrative in our minds because it doesn't have. Sorry? Were you? Okay. Anyway, this is a transgenerational narrative. We must put on the table how this mindset always perverted the idea of a victim. What does a male violence victim mean? It doesn't mean that in a patriarchy framework, the women that are able to resist against, to go against the violence, to get empowered and being resilient historically, they told us that being a victim of a sexual violence experience will have an impact on vulnerability, openness, dependency, traumatic women. So at the end, finished women. A few days ago, I worked with a woman, and she told me, "I'm like a rotten fruit." This is the feeling that she had. I won't be able to get rid of this stigma and always being ashamed. This perversion of the concept, I must finish. The only I want to insist on, and a very vital and key aspect that has to do with this, has to do with this public aspect and how we are judged in the public eye. So the ones are able to break the silence facing this huge oppressor system as a patriarchy, you have to pay a high personal price. That's why we must support each other for not to feel alone. As we witness that women are breaking silence, there are always obstacles against us. Let me just say, as a conclusion, we must be able to build this new pattern of life from a radical perspective, completely radical perspective of patriarchy. In a serious manner, we must destroy patriarchy. As Moons mentioned before, we must recover, we must put into practice our rights, and mainly from feminist movements to give a new shade of light, to mirror ourselves, to offer new spaces to our voices, and to resist from an individual and collective perspective. So at the end, sorority, like under the earth streams, appear finally, as Rita Segato says, and this includes and embraces everything that I wanted to share. She appeals of the words of the Sphinx, creating patriarchy. In front of patriarchy, you distract me or I'll devour you. We must know what patriarchy is making in this society, otherwise we'll get devoured. Giving much more visibility will be the revolutionary response against patriarchy. Let's take care of ourselves and let's put life at the center of our days. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alba. It has been great, great. It is good what you said. We didn't, and the idea of comfort, the acceptance that we hold for many centuries when talking about the violence against women and how we should cry it out this problem. With any further, I'd like to offer the floor to Maria del Mario Pascual. She's a great woman engaged in the social and cultural changes, fighting against normalization of male violence. She's a psychologist and lecturer at the University of Barcelona, an expert in the field of gender violence will share with you the curriculum of the speakers. She's very engaged in women policies in Catalonia, a plan that was adopted in 2005. She's working together with the different platforms and Council of Catalonia. He is a member of the board of handicapped, physical handicapped patients at COSEMFE, member of the Catalan Plan and Strategies for Daily Life, member of the Family Observatory of the Department of Social Policies, member of the Mixed Commission of the Health Department for Women with Disabilities, member of the State Council for Women, and member of the Carme Association, and also accredited by the General Assembly of the United Nations, Women at the 21st Century, Development of Women in the 21st Century, that was held in New York in 2000, representing the Association Non-Standard Women. I'd like to give her the floor. She's a great expert in this field. Please, you have the floor, Karma. Thank you very much, Montserrat. Thank you very much to all of you. It is a pleasure to be amongst you today. I'd like to thank the platform. Thank you very much for offering us the possibility and to making us much more visible. All women, but mainly we are much more excluded because being a women and with disabilities, this made us to be much more excluded. I do have a presentation and we'll share it with you. I don't know why it's not going forward. Okay, yeah, please. The other one. You know what happened? I always write my curriculum because once you are a disabled woman, you are always introduced as an woman. This is not the case today, I'm sure. I'd like to thank you, Mons, for your words. However, that's why I always write my curriculum. Please, the next one. I talk about this idea of normalization. Normalization, it is a violent practice. Male centrism and divide a population in groups: men, women, public space, private space, disabled people, normal people, disabled and handicapped women. And what do I mean with this concept of normalism? It is not a many years we understand what is racism, but we don't know what is normalism. Once we see disabled or handicapped people, we go far away from these disabled people because we had an education system that made us to get far from those individuals, as well as handicapped. It are all the actions that our society are very competitive, especially in the public sphere. This concept of handicappism consists of looking for weaknesses, for weaknesses, and to feel much more powerful and get far away from the handicap. In this case, handicappism picks our handicaps and imposes us a bad because we are different. This look of male women, non-women will be able to be normal, and women will never be able to reach this level of being normal. Please, I don't want this slide anymore. It is not necessary. I do prefer to talk myself. Please, if you can take out the PowerPoint presentation. I cannot see myself now. I feel unsafe if I cannot see myself on the screen. Well, what a terrible situation. I try to make my best. Please, I feel much more comfortable if you get rid of. We disabled women, we are far away of this male vision. We are the weaker part. We feel that we are not a woman. We are like a goat. We are like a commodity that has problems. And that's where all the aggressions are suffering, right? And we feel the aggressions. What make these women to be less vulnerable, much more vulnerable and vulnerated and ignored. So we are used to talk about vulnerability, and we must bear in mind that if we are vulnerable, it means that we can be vulnerable. Therefore, what we have to do is to talk about vulnerable. What these women suffer, it is the difficulty to detect the signs of violence related to with the fact of being disabled, as well as we are treated as a child. We are not ever listened. Maybe you are down the street and everybody tells you what you have to do. Maybe you have to wait for the light to turn green, and someone next to you tells you, "Go ahead, it's green," as if I didn't know the difference between a red light and a green light. And maybe they can hold you and they can touch because they didn't see you as anyone. Everybody wants to educate you. The lack of credibility. Uh, Handicapped women, it's always an issue because if you complain on about something, they tell you that you are not right, that you are great, and everybody feels that you invented from scratch what you suffered. The moral difficulties of a society to acknowledge uh, women that offered an abuse, suffered an abuse of sexual violence. It's difficult from functional diversity and disabled women. We feel that we are much more vulnerable and we are not able to be able to protect ourselves. I am a handicapped woman. I have a wheelchair, an electric wheelchair. When I went to this grocery store, they always keep me in a room. But since I have the electric chair and I step on feet, they don't skip the queue, right? It is quite interesting. People think that they don't have to respect you. Something very important it is that it is difficult to denounce the different abuses and the relationship with the cures, as well as lack of image, great image, a lack of credibility when you complain about the fact that you suffered in different social. Also, it is much more difficult to express your problems. Also, the role that you have as a woman and the negation of the roles that you have been allocated because you suffer difficulties. Now, please, if you can share my presentation, 80% of women suffering disabilities are violence victims. These data are from 2004. Can you hear me? So can you put the presentation? I'm suffering a lot because I cannot see myself. Usually, I like to. Yeah, we all suffer the same problem. Well, I just want to try why disabled women violence. Not the previous one. We have a graph, page number 12. Page number 12. The previous one. Previous one. No, not this one. Next one, next one. The European Parliament only offered a report in 2004. 80% of disabled and handicapped women suffer sexual violence or male violence and has 4 times more possibilities to suffer violence. This is what the European Parliament says. 68% of these women, they live in home care centers and they suffer violence because usually women do suffer from those close to them because they are very excluded and separated from the others. The only that can violate them are members of the family, health care staff, or caregivers. Let me offer some data of uh, sexual violence from the couple from 2015. As you can see, physical disabled women suffer 16.1% and compared with non-disabled women, around 10%. Sexual violence, this has been a macro survey. 14.1% of disabled women suffer this violence. To psychical sexual violence, 20.3%, and 0.1% no, didn't suffer. Fear of 19.1% of disabled women when compared 12% of that are not disabled. Psychological violence 9.5, 5.2, sexual violence, sorry, emotional and psychological violence 30.3%, non-disabled women 20.1%, domestic violence 10%, and economic violence 17.7, 10.4. This shows us that the violence against disabled women is much bigger. I always say that violence is bad for everybody. We all suffer from violence, but disabled women's situation it's much more, let's say, difficult. we can see much more violence. Here, physical or sexual violence outside the couple sphere, it is bigger when talking about disabled women and compared with non-disabled women. Next one, please. 35.1% of disabled women credited. What does this credited mean? Many disabled women doesn't have a certificate of disability, so we cannot witness the reality of figures, but those that are certificated with a disability, we have 35.1%, and non-disabled women 23.7%. So this shows that we disabled women suffer much more violence, and we have much more troubles to have a bigger visibility. However, I do believe that the violence suffered by disabled women have different consequences. Disabled women, let's say, a violence suffered, it is the matrix. We still suffer here in Barcelona the removal of the matrix with the consent of the nurse, and we we many doctors, they remove the uterus because there is like an obsession of not letting us to be mothers, and also because they say that if we have the uterus removed, we'll have less hygienic problems, as if we were not able to offer descendants to the world. And yeah, there is quite a big, there is a low number of STDs coming from disabled women. There are some research studies that say that men have uh, much more possibilities to suffer STDs. At the Goodman Institute, they made a research that shows we don't get infected, and they tell you that you can use certain orthopedics devices when you are pregnant. Another violence that we also suffer comes when a disabled woman, let's say a normal woman, suffers an accident and suddenly has a disability due to an accident, due to work, has to use a chair. She is at the hospital for a while before she comes back home, since she's got the possibility to have a regular daily life. And suddenly, we witness that it is difficult to have access to your house. They cannot work, they cannot walk, they have to change places because they cannot get in the house. And the money that is offered, the economy and the money that we get as disabled women, it's very low, and they buy a new house. They have to do it. So we know that in our organization there are 3 women suffering from money problems because they are not able. Therefore, the husband buys the house on his name. She cannot go out from the hospital and offers the authorization to the husband. And after half a year, more or less, the husband lives with another woman and has to live with them. And she cannot go anywhere else. This is kind of a violence too. It is very difficult to report these cases because there are no resources to do so. Home cares only have one single accessible uh, home care, always occupied by other women. Therefore, a disabled woman, if it leaves a home, is not able to find a home care center. It was difficult to them. We have 3 cases in our association, and the Catalan government offered them the possibility to have an hotel for 10 days. And many women support this violence in a terrific manner, and it's not possible at all for them to find a solution. The graph that you have in front of you, it is the consequence of violence, health violence, and the lack of well-being for women suffering disabilities. Disabled women have a 44.9% health problems, and those suffering violence, let's say normal women, they are around 38.5% health issues. We have also women that have not been victims of violence that have different percentages. You can see that in a normal woman, the percentage is around 24.30% when compared with 44.9%, and 38.5% of disabled women have less well-being than normal women. Let's talk about work reality and the situation. The next one. When we talk about work environment, only 22% of disabled women can work or work. And when they work in a special work center, these CETs. These are centers where you can find all kind of disabilities. And what happened? There was now a job agreement. 3-4 years ago, they began to have this job agreement because they could work for more than 8 hours or 10 hours per day, and they got around €500 only. Today, they have the minimum salary, but what did they do? As a CET say, if they are not able to maintain the structures and they have to pay different services such as transportation, lunch, if they need staff support, everything has been to everything has to be spread amongst the salary. So at the end of the day, they have a very low salary. At the National Blind Invisible and Blind People Association, the ONCE, they sell lottery tickets. We have some of our disabled comrades working for the ONCE, civil servants. Okay, in the past there was a law that prohibited, but around 2000, year 2000, we had a decree that kept some uh, spots for disabled people jobs. But the official exams to be a civil servant, if they are not able to get a job, the civil servant job, the other jobs that are allocated to the regular people, and we cannot have it at all. On another side of the rule, 2% of the people with disability you have to be in companies more than 50 workers, but once they are in this condition, there are very few, and they negotiate with big corporations. The idea, if there were companies that didn't want to accept this law, what they could do, it is to pay some money to a special work center, and with people with disability will work there because the company, instead of having them, will offer money to the special centers of work. These are the measures that they planned. So the majority, Karma, sorry, you should conclude as quick as you can. Sorry, please, can you share with us the other image? This is the academic level. It is very low, as you can see. 26% are illiterate, and 59% they just had primary studies, and higher education 4%, and university 4%. Women with disabilities, we were expelled from school once we had an issue. And in inclusive school, with the inclusive school, we suffer a lot of issues for us to have access to. So we always try not to be there, and they want less students, right? There is a lot of absenteeism that the school produced and provoked by schools in itself. Can we see the next one, please? The City Council Institution for Disabled People, once they were able to compare, and suddenly they realized that there were normal people and disabled people, and we also witnessed what were the costs. They compared what a normal individual did in Barcelona, a normal individual citizen in Barcelona, and they set a category relying on the dependency law. They divided into groups. Physical disability, as you can see in black, group number 3. I will be in group number 3 myself. If I had a regular life as anybody else, due to the social barriers, in order to be included in human resources, to have this life, I will have to have less 49,200 euros, being per year, being a woman 50,000 euros. Well, and this is against our lack of health many, many times. Also, it goes against our family members' lives and our caregivers, because you know what happened? What we have to do, it is to get rid of the barriers, existing barriers. Can we see the next picture? Next one, please. So, disabled women, despite being 60% of women with disabilities, we are 7.5% of the total population, and we are completely invisible. This is what offers us. And where is the majority? So we have the burden of everything that doesn't work. We have to be guilty of it. It is much bigger violence against other women. Can we see the next one? To fight against this violent situation, we have to get rid of the violence suffered by women. And I only wanted to mention that I believe one of these measures should be implemented to dignify the cure work, to recognize the economic rights of the caregivers. This is what we have to develop a new law for self-dependency, and the budget is very low. have to offer more training to the whole society. Society must be aware. Society is not ready to do it. And, well, I hope that society will get ready. But we must include diversity in society for society to know who belongs to society. We need primary essential care systems to respect sexual rights, to have access to all the services. Because if a deaf woman reports violent, a couple doesn't have an interpreter. If it has been another language like in Arabic or English, the police offers an interpreter. However, if she's deaf and needs a sign translation, they do not have it. Access to the job market to respect reproductive rights, new architecture and facilities, and to respect the legislation in Catalonia and in Spain. When related with the architecture and the buildings, they must be accessible, and the health services will have to offer an answer to our needs. I'm very happy to be amongst you. Today it has been kind of a complicated. My intervention has not been clear enough because it was difficult to me to share with you my presentation. I'm much more used to share my ideas without a PowerPoint support. However, I'm convinced that altogether we'll get rid of violence. As Isabel Allende said, the respect has to be earned. No one will offer you respect. Thank you very much, Carme. We feel deeply thankful because after what you share, we can't be quiet. We can change our mindset when talking about disabled women and a functional diversity of women. Society has to be reactive when talking about these issues. You will be always with us. So thank you very much. Now I'd like to give the floor to Maria Teresa Saez. She is a member of Lunes Lilas in Navarra. They were awarded with the Verena Prize, dealing with equality between women and men. She is a teacher, school orientator, PhD in psychopedagogy. From 1997, works at the municipality of Estella in Navarra with gender issues, responsible also for education counseling. In 2010, she worked as equality counselor at the government of Navarra. Also worked from 84 to 88 at a home care women of Navarra, and also member of Divorce and Separate Women. She belongs to the feminist movement since 1985. Also works at the Andrea Service, support for women, founder of a platform Women Against Gender Violence in Navarra, and she created the movement Lunes Lilas and works with women from Informe Sombra, the impact on gender violence and many other platforms. She also has quite a deleted curriculum, and I'd like to give you the floor, Teresa. You have the floor, please. And how do we are right now? Hello. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. Zorionak, for being here, and also for the motto, invisible for many, many time. essential always. It is a pleasure to be together with Alba, Carmen, as well as Merlys and Montse. I do really appreciate the you. I share with you many of my activities. I'm going to talk about sexual violence, and many of you already dealt with the issue. So what you said has been said. I don't want to repeat myself on the issue, but now during this pandemic time, everything that we learn and since everything went to the political and social arena, the issue of sexual violence. As you mentioned, we are facing a reality. Sexual violence is real. Data are clear enough. You mentioned all of them. We can see that there is a violation. It is the tip of the iceberg. We have a rape 1 every 5 hours. The data that we have from other countries are overwhelming. We can see thousands of complaints in the Spanish uh, state, and reality it goes further, and it was very difficult to complain officially, right? Let me just tell you that we have been always forgot. The feminist movement put on the table the issue in the 80s and in the 90s, but suddenly there was a silence because we all acknowledge what happened in 2004, and also the violence and in a couple arena and the abuses and the cruelty, and it was not anymore in the official complaints. We want to be crystal clear and to be listened. Let me just remind you that the sexual violence, as it has been said by Alba, I'm a great supporter of Rita Segato and her perspective. And also, Rita Segato tell us really what's the use that we can see historically, the use in a war, in a battle, the use of sexual violence to get the bodies of women, to invade a country, to invade a land, and to show men that I'm here. That's why I'm raping the bodies of your women, but I want to make you big pain. Therefore, with that, I want to share you that I'm stronger than you are, as well as it is only the tip of the iceberg because we can talk a lot today about sex harassment in the workplace. There are very low numbers of strategies, and the migrant uh, women, Merlys will talk about later, but uh, the abuse of policemen because they were irregular citizens and they suffer feminicide, as well as all the women that are not able to complain. They work at homes, right? They work as assistants in home. They suffer these kind of situations, and not only independent workers, but also family workers in a city council that they also suffer this kind of situation. So I just want to share with you that there is something else that goes beyond rape, violence. There is quite a big diversity of women and how we live and experience ourselves relying on our circumstances and personal situation. As I said before, this is what we witness. It is important to tell you that in the last years we made a step forward. We were able to get out the private sphere, and if we hadn't had this issue in the feminist movement, things would have never happened. There is not an instantaneous generation of issues. It's a collective work, and suddenly we push it out. This was made by the feminist movement in the 80s and the 90s in Navarra, And also in Catalonia, you have loads of experience, and it is true that Navarra it has made a greater practice of this movement. And from 1985, we work not only with sexual violence, but also we work with all the public spaces and how to be in a leisure spaces, in party spaces, public spaces with a condition of equality. This is a word that has been made since 1985. As I mentioned before, and Alba shared with us, the issue related with sexual violence to us comes from a context that has been always existed, but since when we see outside of the private sphere, we can see it in a context where women play a vital role in the public arena. We are at the street, we are also at night, we say that we are there, that it's not a strange space to us. We put on the table that we have sexuality, that sexuality is not maternity. I am the owner of my body. I have wishes, desires, and I have rights. We also have a different trajectory where we have not been believed historically. The bad relationship that we had with the legal systems that is still present when we assessed what the justice possible. We have not never been believed in relationship with the male violence and sexual violence. We had to fight a lot to include these politics. We are like Eve, and this is our position. Right? Let me just tell you that the culture of rape and everything was justified and because it mirrored a society where we didn't have any right at all. And as Alba mentioned, we have virgins, prostitutes, or resigned mothers, and all devoted mother, and the relationship with our bodies. Something has changed, and we standardized the uh, things, right? When you were told, what are you doing here? This is not a space where you belong to. And you want to share that you do not agree, you have to protect yourself the way you wear, the way you look to the others. So we come from that. I don't know if you remember very specific cases. Marhola has a great book, but let me just tell you that the previous cases such as Navarra, we had a lot of murders related with young girls, right? Well, it was something that they deserved. And we felt a sorrow because they were very young girls. And so we instill in our bodies more fear. There was not an answer from a legal, social, citizenship perspective that agreed with everything that happened. Also, the narrative that we had and the imaginary, the public imagination in the US, we had much more shows than movies that showed right the real situation, such as the movie, such as movie Rest. So they were much more aware than we were. So let me insist on the idea once we have the of violation, rape, sexual violence, the real message it is that men go towards the male groups. It is like a marking the territory. I'm much more man than you are. For me to belong to this group, you are asking me to do it. So I'll do it because this patriarchy society offered me the power to do it. So, and also what happened, as Alba mentioned before. Well, we always hidden this sexual violence, and for the first time that we think about it, and the citizens that think about it, it goes from the very few that we thought about it, goes to the majority of the public opinion. It is the Nagore-Lafarge case. This was a great case that allowed us to follow up the impact on the public sphere. And then we had also the cases in Spain of the Manada in 2016, and also the Me Too movement and Cuéntalo. So we are putting in the society perspective all the troubles and issues. But before we suffered fear, the most important thing once you ask to a woman, why do you don't want to officially complain? They tell you, they won't believe me. And this is marked on fire in our bodies. That's why our motto was, I do believe you. This was our motto in our movement. It is right. It is true that justice and society always judge us and didn't believe us. And it still happens. The fear to be accused as prostitutes, what do you do here in this place? This question is troublesome. And also, this made us to feel guilty, and the guilt, as you say, what I'm doing myself in a place that I wouldn't have to be at night or have a drink, these kind of issues that made us to feel much more guilty because supposedly I didn't have to do it. So we have quite an incorporated message, and also the fear of being rejected, right? The shame and embarrassment of being rejected. What would people will happen about me when we talk about the sexual violence in the young girls that happen in the streets? It is a panic to tell their parents what will happen. I told you where you went out at night, and also the friends and so on and so forth. So it's a very bad habit, historical bad habit that we as citizens will always judge, right? We constantly judge women. If you are beaten, well, something you made, right? Why are you so stupid? If you were raped, well, what were you doing that time of the night there? What happened? Are you not able to protect yourself? So I think that you brilliantly understand what I'm saying, right? So to hide the fear, to hide the shame, these strategies of facing this situation that we have in our feminist movement are very clear. We need to turn it around. So of facing this fear, I to believe the idea of sorority, you are my sister, the idea that me too, the idea or let people know, cuéntalo, me too, you are not alone. The idea of that guilt and the shame must change sides. The shame has been in the hands of those that committed the facts, but also guilt. We always uh, said that fear has to be on the other side. We don't want anyone to suffer fear, right? This is a debate that we are experiencing in the feminist movement. This is our perspective too. And also free, not brave. We don't want to be judged if we made resistance, but also the ability to be free enough. We want to be with, and what are our freedoms with sexual violence, whether my also the meaning, mm, whether my briefs are on the floor, I don't have the right to decide. And we said that no means no. We brilliantly provide only yes is yes, and today we can combine them all. Only yes means yes, but no means no. And beyond that, the idea that we are working today, we talked about the consent, but I think that we are facing a new moment. We talked about desire and the consensus, because the consent, it is to consent together with anyone. I do consent towards your desires. No, we don't have to talk about our desire, the to reach a consensus, not to consent. It has been a progress, right? Consent, but how to go forward beyond that? Where the legal system we make great impact from the penal code. The sexual violence is not in the law of 2004. It was modified, I think, Alba, you talked about it. The concept of honor, the progresses that we had from 1995 to 2009 and 2015. And when we talk about the new law, once we made this work, all the feminist strategies together, we made it insisting and trying to work together with uh, girls and women and have been murdered, because we had to create a context for the murders. It has to be in our common memory. Oh, poor girl, it was alone in the street. So I'm not just. We have to put everything in a context together with the institutions. We insisted with different policies in our society. It has to be recalled, and also to bear in mind that we don't have to banalize it all. Several city councils, governments have taken measures, also protocols, everything related with the gender trainings for judges and justices, also questioning the patriarchy and vindicating sexual freedom and the desire for women. You only have 3 minutes. Okay, I'll try to speed up. I'm gonna skip some key aspects that to me are very important and have been different to understand the difference of Nagarela Fax case and many others. First of all, we worked with co-responsibility amongst the feminist movement, the citizen movement, and the different institutions. We made a common work that has been vital, always leader led by the feminism. We work together with the family. Once you listen some specific cases such as the case Casasola, we witness that we work together with all the media to give a voice to all these ideas, and also because we are able to get articulated with the movement of all the state and all the world. It was a great job, and to not never forget, because we made a constant work 2 years ago from the guerrilla fight, and for many years we made these acts real. Never forget the reality beyond all the resources and many other activities that we created all together. Let me just conclude with some ideas with pandemic. First of all, the data on sexual violence in the streets are changing. The data are changing, and we are not always in the streets, right? And there is an incidence in the family environment, and also ages are changing. There are, of course, conflicts in the streets, but there are some cases that made us that think differently. I realized that we have an issue related with sexual violence, empty streets. The antidote And something very important to avoid sexual aggression is to have packed streets. Lots of people in the streets. I can see a problem when the streets are empty. And also, we talked about something else, not just sexual violence. It is a cruel society where human beings are commodities. We don't have a sympathy anymore. We stop the rise of individuals in this kind of a societies, and this goes against the ideal world that we want to build. It is much more general. Something else that I really want to share with you. We are always in a constant debate. I tell you, being feminist is a pleasure, but it's not easy. We talked about the justice issue. This we don't want to punish anyone, but the repairing justice. But we cannot see how this restorative justice will be possible, as in a Nagari case. I'm just talking about different debates that I have on the uh, table, and I do know that we have to offer daily answers, and we cannot skip the justice issue. We need a great justice able to restore. This restorative justice has to be a reality, and we must say what is restorative to all of us. And also, the respect of the victims to their decisions. Well, this debate, it is something that we have on the table. If a woman doesn't want to do anything at all, we keep silent. How we can merge both works? Because both works are fundamental in our daily practice. I don't have to tell you what we did, but this is what we try to implement. In another debate, we are only talking about one specific case and we do forget the other cases. Well, this is not fair. We must put together all the objectives. Navarra Lafarge was a great moment. The Manada was also another moment. This made us possible to put this in the social context, and we must incorporate all the references that are needed for all the movements. Okay, the claims how to report this is vital and not to make women to feel guilty whether if they decide to complain or not, because sometimes they only want to go home and not to get in touch with us. And how we make laws to be respected. We can talk about the new laws, also the creation, it is right, and also all for sexual violence. It was a very clear demand and a law of sexual freedom. And we, as India, and also what happened with the Manada case, we need. But what we need, furthermore, not only great laws, but also to comply with law. Otherwise, there will be much more insecurity and we won't progress. Let me just read something very briefly, and it is a message, our farewell message in our association. Yeah, you can read. We are all here to tell no to unlimited sex in the borders of patriarchy. desired by a man incapable to imagine a different sex, not just the devoted woman. We want to forget. They want us to forget that we are sexual objects, that we think, that we believe, that we feel, that we have our own desire and we have our own pleasure. Fed up. Only half of the population have right to pleasure, and the other half has been condescending. This is not acceptable from our side, and we must get rid of the patriarchy. Thank you very much, Teresa. You work a lot with the Navarra case. It was very important what you did in the last 12 years, and this had a great repercussion in the Manada case. And at the end, well, we can witness and we can talk about the sexual violence, and there were some corrections in the law. We have many others, and we are progressing in this sense. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to give the floor to Merlys Mosquera. She is going to talk. She is a PhD student at the University of Barcelona. She belongs to the GEDIME group, and she's going to talk about the migration, gender, and the causes of migration and the challenges that the migrant women suffer. As I mentioned, she's a PhD sociology student, master on social intervention at the University of Comillas, master on human action, specialist on learning procedures and uh, pedagogy and educational studies at the University of Barcelona. She's also former director of the Jesuit Service for Latin and the Caribbean and coordinating different refugee strategies at the Saint James Scott in Spain Foundation. Experience in ONGs in Latin and international ONGs and more than 20 years in leading rural communities, women and vulnerable population, migrant people in Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, Mexico, Haiti, and Zimbabwe. You have the floor, Merlys. Hello, good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank you. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. After listening to all the contributions of my colleagues, maybe I'd like to thank the effort of the platform to create this exchange space in such a difficult context. It is a moment that is quite ideal, a great moment to put women in the center, despite they are all invisible, will be always essential. And we are essential, as the motto and slogan of the forum says. The purpose of my presentation it is to contribute to make visible the migrant women realities. I'm going to talk about the migrant women reality. My colleagues already mentioned the difference. Therefore, those that due to the different social dynamic experiences that were marked by systematic human rights violations, marked by the vulnerability on their origin countries. They migrate to find a safer place to live in. Let me just think about, and we should think together about these three questions. What is the relationship between the migration and gender, or migrations and genders in plural? What are the causes of women migration? And thirdly, what are the challenges of migrated women? In order to share with you the relationship between gender and migration, let me start telling you that migrant people only represent 13% of the world population. But beyond this figure, what makes different the nowadays migration movement, it is the evaluation of migrant flow, as well as the different migration currents that changes the places where people go. From a gender perspective, we must highlight an holistic look to the different migrant trajectories towards going beyond binaries and men and women and to incorporate the experience of the LGBTI activities. I'm going to talk about the women experience. Women that went from the migrants together with their husbands migrate on their own from different studies. One of the main reasons of this kind of feminine migration it is produced on are victims of violence, sexual violence, and they migrate to avoid and also to get rid of all possibilities and personal growth. Therefore, we start to study feminization of a migrant with a very specific and subjective uh, signification means that only answer the new structure of the job market, but in many other structures. It is very important to understand the relationship between economy and also we put at the center all the conditions and conditions, family, the evidence of the potential of the autonomy of women despite their subordination or our subordination. The process of migration is very common. We can see that we have economy migrations in order to improve their job improvement career, but also the forced migration is a consequence of several violence and focusing on that perspective, I'm going to talk about the John Dalton triangular violence model. I'm going to give you mainly examples from Latin America. We don't have the direct violence. We talked before about the effects of this kind of violence against the direct violence. It is used in war countries such as Syria, Congo, Colombia, where we can witness the process, but also in other countries that have different social trouble conflicts such as Honduras, El Salvador, Mexico, Catalonia, with a lot of immigrants coming from those countries of origin. Expression of these violence it is embodied in murders, forced desperation, torture, kidnap, also forced displacements, and next to that, we have the structural violence. From adult perspective, this cultural violence it is expressed through poverty, exclusion, and inequalities. Some of the previous colleagues talk about it. In the women case, it is translated into work exploitation and lack of opportunities for the hoarding of a power and then finally the symbolic violence that legitimate and disrespect women, such as the naturalization of violence against women given the violence as the offenses and abuses, everything in where women are forced to leave their countries of origin. Therefore, one from an academic perspective about forced migration, about gender violence victims that not necessarily get a protection of the international legal frameworks to protect the refugees. And also, in this case, we talk about the understanding of migration, of human trafficking. With the migrated women situation, I just want to offer you a migrating you the violence in the countries of origin. It belongs to a process that needs to be societies where these women get, and also the citizens of origin. This situation deserves a much more attentive perspective. In this case, I'm talking about being forced to migrate, and in the majority of the cases, they have a lot of trauma, suffering, grief, and despite the reality of my country is still present, all the elements are still there in all the trajectories of women. Well, mourning of migration, clash, and unfortunately, these social dynamics never disappear based on privileges and power structures from the roles of gender perspective. We can see them how they reappear in a different now. I'm not just only a woman, I'm a migrant woman too, with all the implications of this. Therefore, one of the major challenges it is to have a new look as a criteria to better analyze this gender violence and all the narratives behind and all these strategies to overcome it. There is a differential component from the ethnic, social class, the place of origin perspective that puts different conditions to have access to rights, opportunities that will limit the capacity of empowerment of women. To me, it should be like offering a justification to this perspective that justifies the silence we were talking about at the beginning of the migration includes all this self-censorship. Otherwise, you will feel differently and you won't feel legitimated to get involved in the real life. Finally, challenge related with the risks of being re-victimized once again. So to revive and to re-experience violent experiences that you were escaping from, such as sexual harassment at the workplace, in the public space, as we talked before. And I do believe that all the context I'm talking about that includes this neo-victimization that carries this re-victimization, the comprehension, the inclusion, the participation in the community, all the procedures could be blocked because it is the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge it is to overcome this disadvantaged situation. COVID, well, are also important stakeholders when talking about care and caregivers. And also, they are under working conditions that do not represent the right parameters set by the citizens in the European space. And it worsens the reality, relying on the situation of non-legal women situation, right? Due to the fact that they do not have the documents and the permits and the papers, they cannot have access to the whole legal and protection framework that finally will get. And as a conclusion, I just like to throw you two questions for you to think about it, something that we'll see in the next sessions. In the middle of all this reality, I wonder what are the alternatives that we have to get in touch with this reality? How will I overcome the challenges? They are quite simple questions, right? But they deserve to be at the center of our discourse. And when dealing with the migration situation and also when dealing with vulnerable women. Also, the empowerment, training, education, also how to build a community. And then finally, some of the hints that will make overcome to these obstacles will be to be able to create cooperative and collective leaderships to better manage diversity and the participation framework of migrant women. Thank you very much. And once again, I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to give me the floor. Thank you very much, Merlys. We feel deeply thankful. Thank you very much for being amongst us. If there is a hidden violence, this hidden violence it's much more suffered by these migrant women. Therefore, yes, we have in this forum several activities in line with these issues that you opened. Thank you very much. We feel very grateful. Thank you very much to all the speakers. The way you shared all your ideas, it is the capital to start with these kind of violences, these hidden violences, and all the presentations. And now, would like to see if there are questions. Our dear colleague Teresa Saez has to leave us because, well, she has to go to work. If there are questions related with sexual violence, the other panelists will answer. Okay, now we'll have time for questions and answers. So you have 2 minutes. Georgina Livapena, the Secretary of Infancy, and she had to leave. We also have Ariela Rosenmark, Secretary of Equality, Migration, and the Catalan Government, is amongst us. Carme Wall, Abia, Director of the Catalan Agency for Cooperation. Barbara Roch Merino, Director of Feminism, LGBTI at the City Council of Barcelona, Bartit Layave. She works for the prevention programs and avoiding gender violence and Director of Civic Actions at the Catalan Government, Montserrat Taroca. Vice Director for Sexual Abuse in the Catalan Government, Ramon Pérez, Executive Director LGBTI, Laia Franco Ortiz, the Chief and Executive of LGBTI Women at the Barcelona Government, Montse Corrales from the Information Department, and the City Council of Barcelona, as I mentioned at the beginning. Thank you very much for your collaboration. And I'd like to give the floor to you all. If you want to ask a question or comment. Thank you very much, Monte. Thank you very much. Let me just thank you all. All the contributions have been very interesting. My question would be the next one. It is a question for Maria Teresa Saez. I don't know if you'll have time to answer or you'll have to leave us. I do have time, yes. I do have time for a question. I do have 5 minutes. Okay, great. 5 minutes, right? Something key to me to work with the sympathy of women and men against sexual violence. How do you approach this issue? Because I do believe that it is quite important. In our city council from 2011, we work with prevention of violence for men, working masculinity, alternative, and so on and so forth. And it is like being preaching in the desert. I don't know if you have some keys or can you shed some light? If there are other questions for sexual violence, please go ahead. Therefore, Tere will be able to answer to that question. Monte, if you don't mind, would like to intervene. Thank you. The presentations have been very interesting in such a weird year. It is the lockdown year. We witnessed very important things. First of all, we only have 2 minutes. First of all, just let me tell you that it is more than obvious the essential role of women in such as professions like caregivers that are essential to take care of our society. This is an experience in March, April, when we had thousands of women that are taking care, working in this sector. It has to be sought and to offer much more dignity, to offer rights, to offer citizenship, and it's not possible sometimes. And it was a year that we had to consider all the possibilities and also to hire caregivers, also to have an administration perspective much more solid. And the second idea, in such a weird time, the lack of visibility or to make visible and to make effort to see the violence in close spaces, the violence at home. We'll know about these issues, but this year increased a lot, so this required a massive response. It required much more efforts in our network. This is why we have for more times new partners in our city council, but also, also less known spaces. The situations such as the people that have to repay for rent, they re-rent, and just living in a room with many other individuals, this well creates much more violent situations, as well as the in lack of visibility, as Merlys mentioned, the vulnerability of the hidden economies and many others. We can say many things, right? As a conclusion, I do believe that it has been a very big year trying to offer new services from the and also the vulnerability of women has been raised, and also how to put at the center the caregiver's role, and the situation of violence has to be denounced. The situation of women that do not have, let's say, a place to be. And why do we have more women that live in the street than men? Well, homeless women suffer much more violence than men. And the main goal, it is not to have women suffering in the private arena, suffering sexual violence. And now I'd like to give the floor to our Vice Director against sexual violence. This is the first institution that works against it. We have Montse Sanchez. If you don't mind, Montse, please, she has to leave. If Barbara Roach wants to answer, please. Just 5 minutes. Teresa has to leave us. Tere, please, if you want to answer. I didn't get all the interventions. I do understand Catalan, but not as much as you could. The magic bullet, we don't have it all. We must have a crystal clear awareness. It is a fundamental to work with boys and men. Always questioning the cruelty, the lack of sympathy. How can we do it? First of all, we need to work together with groups of men working with masculinities. We can see much more groups, and we can see some professionals. We have some specialists who working in equality, and we'll have the other professionals that will work for men's equality, for boys, for men, boys and men. They have to work in this sense, and also we have to work from a positive perspective. We cannot say you are all rapists. We must be positive. You can be mad, but in a positive manner. Let's work differently. We'll take care of ourselves, we are love ourselves, and we love all people we are getting in touch with. They are not just objects. We can have a pleasure with them. And something very important that we must work with the boys and men, it has to do with sexuality, the fears that they have today, not the fears coming from 30 years ago. Today, girls are they have much more freedom from a sexual perspective, but there are still fears instilled in our society. It is difficult, but it is a fundamental. Thank you very much, Tere. Good luck and thank you for being amongst us. I'm sorry I have to leave you. Monte, please, if you want to share your words with us? No, it's good. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much to your platform once a year. Once more, sorry. We are here gathered, putting at the center of this debate violence against women, gender violence of women. Let me just tell you two few things. Something that has been mentioned by our General Secretary, and today, in this quite exceptional year, in which we can witness the creation of this institutional space from the Catalan government to deal with male violence, and we double fold the amount of resources, and also to recall you the message of the minister. Once we said that we had to double fold the amount of resources, the message that he conveyed was that we couldn't tolerate anymore women getting out from home, feeling in the need, had to be with someone else, right? And this is what we did. We double fold the resources to have a solution for all the Catalan women. And also the challenge has been underlined to work together with men. This is a new challenge for next year. In a future horizon, we'd like to work together with some strategies aiming at men. The efforts aiming at women made us to be where we are right now, but we also have to work aiming at men. Thank you very much, Montserrat. Thank you. I know that you made huge efforts, but as I mentioned at the beginning, yeah, you do loads and you do things, and you may, but the situation is quite complicated, and we are all together to keep on moving. Someone else wants to say something, wants to share their ideas. I don't think so. Okay, Monse, I am Nuria from the ICD. I just want to say something because that you made a great job. In any case, I cannot see your eye. Sorry. These new virtual conferences are quite tricky. We'll learn little by little. Anyway, I'd just like to thank you all. Thank you very much for this seminar. And once again, we witness that we can feel much more inequalities due to the pandemic. And we can see much more obstacles for social, personal, and professional evolution of women. And we witnessed in the beginning that the pandemic has impacted much more women as well as their children. And also, we witnessed how this impacted all the professionals and uh, caregivers that offer them support. It is important on my side, mainly because they are organizations that count with a lot of in their staff. From the Catalan Institute of Women, together with other offices, organizations, we made a great deal of coordination to create new strategies. We wanted to reinforce the alliances, to reinforce our services, and also to recall that the real situation of male violence it is very complicated. The lack of sympathy between society and male violence, and it is what mentioned for many years. We made a great job, and we want to get involved with the whole citizens. Many challenges in front of us from this feminist perspective, from this intersectional and cross-link perspective, and also the new paradigm will offer us a new possibility to rethink what we really want to do towards a more egalitarian future, fighting against male violence, gender violence. So I'd like to take advantage of this forum to keep on working and to have much more freedom, free of male violence in the planet. And this is what we have to say crystal clear. The work that has been made, the different alliances has been always in the mindset of the feminists, and together the citizens, institutions, administrations have to work together to reinforce these alliances. Thanks again. Many great ideas stem from this conference. They invite us to keep on working, uh, facing this second wave of a lockdown that for sure will make the women's situation worsen, and we'll have to offer them all the support from our side, from the administration side, to support the women in this such a crazy and complicated circumstances, as we can witness through the virtual meetings that we have to make. Thank you very much, Nuria. We'll be the bridge amongst the administration and women. We'll make our best. We'll keep an eye on what happens and how to work together. If there are no more questions, I'm Karma Wall. Just a second. Hello, Karma. Let's speed it up. I cannot see you. I'm really sorry. Well, I just want to reiterate all the congratulations and the greetings and the amazing work of the Francesca Bonmisoin and the platform. Very powerful strategy. Once again this year, despite we are in a virtual environment, we have a lot to do. We can continue working on that, right? And it's great. It's great. So we are at the center of the discussion. The pandemic made us to be in our homes. But once again, we have a much more international perspective. What we suffer here, we can witness all over the places, and we work together with other feminist organizations. A great work that we made from our agency. Sometimes it's hard to work in a private sphere since the lockdown, right? And this increases the level of violence at home. Just let me tell you that we remade our strategies. We strengthen the work made in Mozambique or in Latin America and in many other regions. And now in Mozambique, we work together with several Mozambique institutions. We have 16 days of work together with the Ministry of Work in Mozambique. So we put at the center the gender violence together with them. And also, yesterday, I participated in a session together with the Colombian institutions and a feminist economy. Where are we aiming at? And frankly, women, they must fight for the place that they deserve. And they deserve it. What can we do to reduce the obstacles for them to be able to develop more equal strategies? I do must be deeply thankful for all the contributions. Let me just say thank you very much. Thank you very much because we are all invited year after year. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, great. We have 4 questions, but if you don't mind, maybe there are 3 questions for Carme. I'd like her to answer the questions. I'll give her a written. They'll answer written and Neuroka. She, Teresa Saez, she's not here anymore with us, so I can write Teresa Saez for her to answer the question where to find new data related with sexual violence. So if you don't mind, that's all for now. We have to finish at 12:30, right? This is the issue that when we have the virtual meetings, we have to stop on time. And I'd like to invite you all. I'd like to invite you to participate in the forum if you want to watch a very short movie, and as we can see in the program, right? And I'd like to invite you all to assist to all the meetings in all the round and panels, and please, round tables, please get engaged, get involved on everything that we do. We are very happy. We want to carry on working despite the real situation, sharing with all of you this amazing space and virtual rooms, and I hope that we'll have a fruitful forum. Thank you very much for your kind participation and works, and we'll meet each other through the screens. Thank you. Bye.
Molt bones a totes! Som la Melancòmica i avui hem vingut a parlar-vos de coses de dones. Com per exemple...
Tetes. És brutal tenir tetes. Vosaltres penseu que ens les podem tocar wherever you want, wherever you can. A la dutxa, al llit, al lavabo...
Per molt que un home hagi tocat moltíssimes tetes, nosaltres ens les hem tocat 10 milions de vegades més. Que això és com d'una bola antiestrès incorporada.
Sí, total.
Bolon.
Però de tetes potser se'n parla molt, no?
Potser podríem parlar, no sé, d'alguna cosa així com més íntima. El clítoris. Què me'n diu d'un òrgan destinat únicament al plaer sexual? Toma ja.
Epa, i és gran, eh?
Sí, que això no surt als llibres d'anatomia, que n'hi ha per fora i n'hi ha per dins, també. Com tampoc surten totes les glàndules d'Eskene, de Bartolino, bueno, totes amb noms d'homes. El punto G, que és la pròstata femenina. Ningú parla de la pròstata femenina. I tornant al clítoris, és sensible, eh?
Sí, vull dir, aquesta gent que toqueu en plan DJ i rotllo... Pareu ja, vale?
No el borrareu.
És que fa mal. Stop, DJ.
Say the clítoris. Perquè a més és tan sensible, que ara explicaré una cosa que només les dones amb vulva podran entendre. Quan et tires un pedete i surt per davant i fa... Saps aquelles pessigolletes?
Això és molt fort, perquè a més no hi ha una col·locació concreta dels Pirineus.
No t'ensenyen a Pilates com fer que vingui així, no?
No, és super random.
Hi ha un dia que... Alegria pel cuerpo! Juga a la loteria aquell dia, eh?
És veritat.
I això sí que és una experiència autènticament femenina. Sí. I parlant d'experiències, hi ha aquella que és l'experiència femenina.
Ja sé per on vas. L'embaràs. Noies, dones, Verge Santa! Vosaltres imagineu-vos tenir una petita criatura dins teu amb el seu petit cor, cun-cun, i el teu bum-bum, i el seu cun-cun, i el teu bum-bum. I lo guapes que ens posem les dones quan estem embarassades? Este brillo en la piel, esta sensualitat, no te la quita nadie, eh? Vale, imagineu-vos 9 mesos de gestació amb aquesta petita criatura dins i va creixent fins al moment del part que culmina i apa! On podràs veure el cordó umbilical, que és la perfecta metàfora visual d'aquest vincle de la mare amb el filla, o el que ella decideixi.
Perquè tu, quants embarassos has tingut?
Tipus que cap encara.
Tipus que no saps del que parles. Encara.
La regla. D'això sí que sé del que parlo.
No. Voldràs dir la regla. No. Voldreu dir la regla. Joder. Que no ho veieu? No se'n parla mai. O sigui, totes les dones tenim la regla. Totes. Un moment, que entre això i els temes que portem, les dones transsexuals es podrien sentir molt discriminades i jo això no ho voldria per res del món. A més, també tenim dones cis que no tenen la menstruació perquè tenen amenorrea o la bendita menopàusia, que és quan... No he dit res. Canvia tema.
Aviam, noies, hi ha molts temes que ens afecten a totes. Per exemple, conciliació laboral.
És que, doncs ja sent artistes, doncs prou fotut ho tenim, no?
Més amb la Covid.
Sí. Com a molt precarietat laboral. Per precarietat laboral, la bretxa salarial. Entre molts altres temes laborals. Sí, o altres temes dels quals no hem parlat encara.
Com els matrimonis forçats.
Les ablacions.
Els feminicidis. Potser no fem broma d'això, no?
Per bona broma? La depilació.
Perquè tant si ho fas, com si no, és tot un tema.
Com el maquillatge, que tant si ho fas, com si no, és tot un tema.
I els talons. Què me'n dieu dels talons? Per favor.
Mira, això només serveix per fer mal, de veritat,
Amb tota la varietat de sabates que existeixen al món, s'havien d'inventar els tacons d'agulla. Per favor, és un crim.
Perdona, i amb tota la varietat de roba que tenim nosaltres, jo no em sé decidir, de veritat. Les mànigues, ara hi ha màniga llarguíssima, màniga llarga, màniga tres quarts, màniga que només molesta, màniga curta, llavors va la màniga encara una mica més curta, que depèn del
samarretes d'avui dia, entre mànigues i escots, tenim el tema sostén, perquè el sostenidor se't veu per davant, per darrere, per aquí, que et surt la tira, que et surt per aquí, que se't veu, que se't nota, que dic jo, mira, entre inventors de samarretes i inventors de sostenidors, es podrien ficar d'acord,
Sisplau, comunicació, és un gran problema.
Noies. Estem parlant de roba, com si això fos femení. Això no és femení. Això és un clitxé i barato. Voleu una cosa femenina? Femenina de debò?
El XVI Forum contra les violències de gènere.
Això sí és femení.
I què farem en aquest fòrum?
Hi haurà de tot, hi haurà xerrades,
Tallers,
jocs,
col·loquis.
Col·loquis aquí o col·loquis allà?
Exacte.
I sobre quins temes?
Doncs, per exemple, les cures.
Què cures?
Les cures.
Com que les cures? En tot cas, les monges. A l'església les dones només poden ser monges, no poden
Nena.
ascendir. Els cures són homes.
Els cuidados.
Els cuidados!
Clar, les cures a la gent gran, les cures als infants, les cures a la gent dependent.
Tenir cura de tothom, menys d'una mateixa.
Parlarem sobre economia feminista en temps de Covid.
Vinga, adeu.
Interculturalitat i feminismes.
Jo sóc xarnega.
Jo sóc mig marroquina.
Jo... de Masnou.
Els negacionistes de les violències masclistes.
O sigui, Vox.
Parlarem de les dones migrades i diverses. Però si jo vaig néixer a Santa Maria de Palautordera.
Perdó.
Parlarem d'amors tòxics.
Amors tòxics són aquests que van deixant borilles per la casa, no?
Ah!
O que es tallen les ungles al menjador. I els que es tiren pets sota l'hidrògeno i després fan així. Però pets d'aquests que alimenten, dels densos.
Dels pets tòxics.
Sí, que et piquen els ulls i tot.
Ara us he de dir una cosa. Les dones també es tiren pets.
També.
Tocarem el tema de polítiques i feminisme.
Com arribar a presidenta! Què passa? Hi ha països que tenen presidentes, ja.
Sí, però això és Espanya.
I? Un altre tema serà les dones joves invisibles. M'esteu dient que no sóc jove?
Ens ensenyaran què fer amb la ràbia.
Bruixa!
Histèrica.
Me cago en...
Feminazi!
Farem tallers com...
Dansa, cos.
Ment, cor...
Ai, que bé que sona. M'apunto. Per fi farem educació sexual, aquella gran oblidada en què no ens van parlar mai ni del nostre ni del nostre que no l'hem vist mai sencer, només partit, i què me'n dieu dels problemes o la o que és quan se't surt tot, i que he dit ja de la No, d'això no se'n parla mai, però per fi ha arribat el moment. I també parlarem del plaer sexual femení, perquè tenim i de tot això no ens han parlat mai, collons!
En sèrio?
I ens acomiadarem amb l'actuació de Dones de Blanc i de la Melancòmica.
Tot això i més...
El XVI Forum contra les violències de gènere.
Us hi esperem!
Em veus? No em veus.
تراني لا تراني.
Em veus? No em veus.
Em veus? No em veus. ¿Me ves? No me ves.
Em veus? No em veus.
¿Me ves? No me ves.
Em veus? No em veus. Em veus?